And also a special thanks to our ACF staff, community investment team, for putting together this outstanding program. They just tell me to buy the food and to show up, and they do all the rest. So I have the best of both worlds. You're in for a great treat today. For some of our speakers, we are so indebted to them for spending some time with us to be able to learn a little bit more about the arts and culture scene here in Greater Akron. So we hope you take some knowledge out of this. We hope you ask questions. We hope you talk to the fellow panelists who are up here and really make them feel welcome after their presentation. So with that, I will turn it over to my colleague, Dr. Cristina Gonzalez Acala, who will continue our program and get things started. Cristina.
Thank you, JG. Best boss ever. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for being here. I am so thrilled for this panel that we have put together for you. As you know, art isn't just about decoration, right? It's direction. It reflects our values, it moves our hearts, reimagines what's possible. And here in Akron, we're seeing just how powerful the arts can be, not just in the galleries, but in storefronts, sidewalks, neighborhoods, and even financing structures. Today's presenters are living proof that creativity is community development. They each bring a powerful perspective on how culture intersects with history, economic growth, and belonging. So let's dive in. Oh, yeah, there we go. We'll kick off things with a historical framework from Akron's historian Dave Lieberth. We will follow up with Rachel Bridenstine, president of Development Finance Authority, who's leading innovative strategies for funding cultural and community infrastructure. Then we'll have Rick Rogers, founding executive director of Curated Storefront, who has transformed Akron's urban core into a living canvas. After that, we'll hear from Allyse Love and Mac Love, who are both, Allyse is owner and co-founder and chief operator of Art by Love, and Mac Love, co-founder, chief catalyst, and lead artist, whose public art and storytelling work center community voice and identity. And rounding up our lineup is Dominic Moore-Dunson, producer, choreographer, and founder of Moore-Dunson Company, whose work explores creative engagement and the role of the artist as a community connector. And his Remember Balloons piece that aired on PBS was what we were just watching when you walked in there. After the presentations, we'll move into a panel discussion and open it up for your questions. So get ready to be inspired, challenged, and reconnected to the transformative power of the arts. Let's begin. Dave, take us away, please.
Thank you, Cristina, but you forgot something. I usually have entrance music. Bill, please. I thought we would start with a new bicentennial fanfare commissioned by Tuesday Musical, which premiered April 22nd at Thomas Hall, composed by Peter Boyer and performed by the Cleveland Orchestra's brass and percussion sessions. It's really a great piece of musical art that sets in motion the bicentennial celebration. In 1920, Akron was the fastest growing city in the United States. And the owner of a New York art gallery came to the city, and he hosted an exhibition of paintings and prints. Her wealth is so new, he said, apologizing for the city's lack of art, that she has not had time to study art. And for the first 100 years of its history, Akron was often characterized as a cultural wasteland. I think the earliest work of talented artisans were probably those native people who traveled over the watershed divide between the Cuyahoga and the Tuscarawas rivers, the Portage Path. At the Akron History Center, we display a 400-year-old intact pot decorated with the collar that is typical of the Haudenosaunee artists. It was excavated a century ago in the Cuyahoga Valley. Function and form, design, or art, if you like, were unified by indigenous people. This flint knife was excavated from 100 years ago on the Cyberling estate, Stan Hewitt, on the Portage Path. And of course, the path itself is marked by a wonderful piece of art, a monumental sculpture created by Onondaga Seneca artist Peter Jones. When we dedicated these statues in 2001, they were only one of two larger-than-life statues of Native Americans done by a Native American artist in the United States. Much of Akron's art history parallels the growth of higher education in Akron, a product of the wealth created by John R. Buchtel, president of the Buckeye Mower and Reaper Company in 1870. Buchtel College became the municipal university of Akron in 1913, and when Buchtel College opened in 1873, residents with more refined tastes began to look to the Hilltop campus for inspiration in arts and letters. In 1872, the Cary Literary Society for Women began, as did the William Cullen Bryant Society for Men, which started a short time later. In 1873, the college presented a theatrical drama on stage, The Last Loaf. It was standing room only, even though they were charging an admission of 25 cents. Students were performing declamations, elocutions, and orations at chapel services. Buchtel College established an art school in 1889. There were classes in drawing, portraiture, charcoal, and watercolor painting. And the art school's reputation was enhanced by a public gallery, but it was wiped out by a fire in 1899, destroying all their collections. Not until the 1960s did the art department have its own home in Schrank Hall, headed by Dr. Emily Davis, and of course the current gallery is named in her honor. The School of Art still bears the name of philanthropist and art collector Mary Myers. It was her husband Lou Myers who started the tire supply company Myers Industries. In 1902, a new art league was formed by the superintendent of the B.F. Goodrich Company, Edwin Shaw. His personal collection would become the nucleus of the new Art Institute. And of course, Akron Community Foundation owes its start to the estate of Edwin Shaw as well. The Art Institute traces its beginnings to 1922. It opened in the basement of the Akron Public Library, the Carnegie Library, on East Market Street. And then a decade later, they moved the galleries to the 6th floor of O'Neill's department store. In 1936, the museum rented space on Howard Street in the improbably named Wiener Arcade. In 1937, they moved to their first permanent home, the former mansion of Jedediah Cummins on Fir Hill. The first exhibit featured paintings and ceramics and sculpture owned by Akron residents, including a suit of armor. Then, on January 2nd of 1942, fire. Nearly everything that the Akron arts community had worked so hard to achieve over 20 years disappeared overnight. The blaze destroyed priceless relics and left the museum without a permanent home for nearly a decade. In 1950, the Institute moved back to East Market Street, and then it stayed put for 30 years. Renamed the Akron Art Museum, they moved across Market Street in 1981 to the former 1899 post office, and as you all know, in 2007, the museum dedicated the new John S. and James L. Knight building. There has always been music in Akron, from the Irish who built the canals to the Germans and ethnic Eastern Europeans who brought their cultures with them. In 1904, the German-American Music Hall, located at East Exchange and High Streets, was dedicated with a performance by Victor Herbert and his orchestra from New York City. In 1887, there were 13 young women with a passion for music who started the Tuesday Afternoon Club. It became the Tuesday Musical Association, and since has sponsored concerts continuously since 1904, and they commissioned that wonderful bicentennial fanfare this year as well. We got a real first-class performing venue in 1920. Goodyear Hall was built by Paul Litchfield for his Assembly of Industrial Workers. This was a first-rate theater that evidenced the growth of audiences in Akron at the time for both musicals and cultural performances including any number of Broadway shows and concerts by Tuesday Musical. In 1872, the first catalog of Buchtel College did list a professor of music, and they provided instruction in musical arts. In 1889, a men's glee club was formed, and the music school presented recitals right up until 1911, when instruction in music stopped. I think it was because they thought such instruction was available elsewhere in town, and they were on hard times. Not until the 1940s did music emerge again on the campus as a baccalaureate major. In recent years, two programs in particular have distinguished the University of Akron's music programs. In 1977, Roland Palucci, one of the most important musical forces to cultivate jazz in Northeast Ohio, joined the university faculty and founded the nationally recognized Jazz Studies program. And in 1980, Professor Larry Snyder of the School of Music formed the Steel Band, one of the country's oldest and largest collegiate steel bands. Being halfway between New York and Chicago on the passenger train lines, Howard Street became a second home for many of America's most popular jazz performers, including Cab Calloway, Count Basie, Billie Holiday, Ella Fitzgerald, Duke Ellington, Louis Armstrong, and more. Akron was racially segregated at the time, and performers, despite their national reputations, had to find lodging at the Matthews Hotel on Howard Street. And of course, this is recalled in this contemporary sculpture by the artist Miller Horns, who also developed a national reputation. When you look at the history of arts and culture in Akron, you're also looking at the history of women in Akron. Women were responsible for the Art Institute, for Tuesday Musical, for the Children's Concert Society. The Summit County Historical Society was founded by the Daughters of the American Revolution. Stan Hewitt simply would have been lost but for the wives, mothers, sisters, and daughters of the men who ran Akron's business. They cautioned against preserving the estate, and it is also true that women are responsible for what we have in dance. In the summer of 1968, the ballerina Kate Firestone came to Akron to rehearse young dancers to perform new ballets. She was married to Harvey Firestone's grandson and had been a dancer with England's Royal Ballet. The city had, at that time, only a smattering of dance programs, including a second-generation school led by Nan Klinger. She had made a connection with New York choreographer Heinz Pohl, and with Kay Auburn, the wife of the university president, Francia Albrecht, Gina Carroll, and other women leaders. Heinz Pohl was invited to come to Akron. Upon his arrival, he actually lived for a while in a camping trailer in Nan Klinger's backyard with the electricity provided by an extension cord going into her house. But they would create a new company of dancers on the university campus, a chamber ballet. Pohl's partner in life and art was the distinguished Broadway lighting designer, Thomas Skelton. He counseled that there was a need for a board of trustees to raise money and to expand the scope of the company. And following a sensational New York debut in 1976, the Chamber Ballet became the Ohio Ballet in residence at the University of Akron for the next 30 years. The last performance of Ohio Ballet was at Goodyear Metropolitan Park in August 2006. It was Heinz who had first created the free summer dance festival that the city had supported at that point for 30 years. I didn't want to see those 30 years of city support to end, so I invited a handful of Heinz's former dancers and representatives of 3 Akron foundations, including Akron Community Foundation, to a meeting, and the Heinz Pohl Summer Dance Festival was born. Honoring Akron's really primary link to the international world of dance, Heinz Pohl, and this year will be the 17th year under the wise direction of James Startzman, featuring Pilobolus this year at Lock 3. Today, the university hosts the National Center for Choreography. It's only the second new Center for Choreography in the country, bringing to Akron some of the country's finest dance professionals. The university's programs in the performing arts today, music, dance, theater, arts administration, are located at Gazetta Hall, which has state-of-the-art dance studios, a recording studio, a music computer center, and Center for Theater, a flexible black box theater. The 77-year-old Children's Concert Society was started by a group of women in 1948. Actually, there were 43 women. I went to the Beacon Journal and counted them. Every one of the 43 women was not identified by her name, but by her husband's name in the newspaper, typical of the day. They had their first concert, Peter and the Wolf, sponsored by the Akron Civic Opera Guild. But they were able to expose around 4,000 5th through 8th graders to concert music for the first time, in many cases featuring the Cleveland Orchestra. In between times, there was this Akron Symphony Association. They started on a shoestring in 1948, and they started to launch a Save Our Symphony campaign, and they had to cancel all the performances for their season due to a lack of funds. The Akron Symphony Orchestra of today, as we know it, really began in 1949 when the business manager of the Akron Beacon Journal gave a $500 check to Mabel Graham to start an orchestra. That'd be about $6,000 in today's money. She and Ralph Gilman founded the Greater Akron Music Association, and in 1953, ASO gave its very first performance at Central Howard High School. There were 56 musicians, led by a high school band director, John Farinacci, and a few years later, the Akron Youth Symphony was formed in 1955, and then a year later, the Akron Symphony Chorus. The remarkable Lewis Lane became music director and conductor in 1959, bringing really world-class talent to Akron. And all of these local music organizations performed in the cavernous Akron Armory, along with circuses and pro wrestling matches, just not at the same time. Akron graduated into the ranks of nationally known cultural attractions in 1973 with the opening of E.J. Thomas Performing Arts Hall. The architectural critic for the New York Times, Ada Louise Huxtable, called it one of the most beautiful and flexible performance halls in the world, with its unique floating 44-ton ceiling. In 1983, Alan Balter was named music director of the Symphony Orchestra, leaving one legacy that we still honor today, Gospel Meets Symphony. It had its first concert in 1994 at the Civic Theater. In 2006, Christopher Wilkins became the new music director, and for almost 20 seasons now, he has created programs with depth and meaning and become popular with audiences. And of course, in these last several years, his very personal campaign to remember Akron's black composer of concert music, Julia Perry, has won national attention and has been printed in the New York Times, in newspapers around the country. The city did add one new entertainment venue in 2003 with the demolition of century-old buildings that covered up Lock 3 of the canal, and now this year it's about to start its 22nd season in the new Maynard Pavilion. This isn't all of Akron's arts history and music history or cultural history. There's a lot more. There's a lot of organizations that I've left out. We have a carefully curated exhibit on the history of music in Akron. It's called Rhythms of the Rubber City. It's 2 doors down at the Akron History Center, and you can stop by and see us Wednesdays through Saturdays, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that, Dave. And now we're going to welcome Rachel Bridenstine to the podium. Thank you. Round of applause for Rachel, please.
Hi, everyone. It's such a pleasure to be here. It's a really hard act to follow, too. But before I go into my organization, Development Finance Authority, and how this kind of intersects with arts and culture, I will say that I started my life in the arts. Both of my parents are musicians. I went to college for vocal performance, actually. Ended on down a route of accounting and finance, which I'm so grateful for. But I think I can say that arts always has been a part of my life, and I am thankful to the arts of how I got to where I am today. So we're not here to talk about me, it's about my organization, and I will move on. So, Development Finance Authority of Summit County. To those of you that are not familiar, we are a public entity. We are a port authority. We've been in existence since the 90s, really. We were first started to preserve railway. Found out that wasn't the best value add to the community. So we got rid of the railway, went more into finance. And I'm not going to get into the alphabet soup of all the other entities. The important thing here to see is that we have other organizations under the mothership, as I call it, of DFA. And they all have specific purposes, and that goal is to create financial products for our community for Summit County. And all of these on the right side have different levels of track record. Most of them are between 5 and 10 years old, and they're private organizations. So we, in the work that we have, is really in essence a public and a private partnership within our own organization. So what I mainly want to speak about is our role in finance in multi-sector investments that are so successful, mainly due to the arts and culture focus that are part of it. So much that we see in economic development is a focus on how do we bring people in, right, from a tourist aspect, how do we create more jobs, how do we create more housing. Sometimes arts gets lost there when it really shouldn't, because it's so important. And I think the success of projects that people think about, it's not because all the dollars that were put in, while it's very important too to get those dollars, it's about what's that product that brings everyone together, and arts is such a big part of it. I'm going to talk about a couple of those projects that stand out to me. They're certainly not all that has been happening, and how it has worked with DFA specifically, how we've been participatory in it, how we've grown as an organization too, to think about intentional investments this way. So the first one, you are sitting in the product of the Bowery Project. I think many of you are familiar with it to some extent. It took a very long time, and I can't tell you the history as well, but from my perspective, I've been working on this project almost since I started with DFA in 2015, and I knew it was very many years before that, but DFA's participation with this block specifically starts way back in 2001, and Howard can appreciate this too and speak to it, of the participation that DFA had of taking ownership of the Civic Theater, not because we wanted to own things, but how to facilitate further investment into the renovations of the building, and that's always been the case since 2001. Still strong partners, and the Bowery Project was very much a strong partnership between DFA, the Civic, and others that were part of it. Here's some before pictures. Some of you will remember this. I certainly remember having strategic meetings about what do we want this to be? How can the reimagining the Civic Commons conversations? And so we, in 2017 was when things really started to move, and who were all playing a part into it. I would take all my time just listing them out. This was truly a public-private partnership. So I am in finance, and I couldn't help but show a structure chart. You can be happy to know that I will not go into detail, but this is a signification of what all it took from a finance perspective to get to what you're sitting in here. How you have Crave, how you have the History Center, how we have created this wonderful development. It took so many public partners, private partners, everyone, to have this be successful. And DFA had a really large role in this, that we own the land. We were a facilitator for pass-through funds, all those things. And that's something that is probably underspoken of what DFA has to contribute to projects in that way. We don't want to necessarily toot our own horn, we want to create value. So enough with the structure chart, because there were tax credits and all that stuff in there. I really loved the aspect of it, but this was the end product, and it's beautiful, right? It's everything. I'm just really excited from my perspective to see it, but when I look at this, I do not see the dollars and the cents that came into it. I see the art, right? And what would be lost here if we didn't have the intentional inclusion of art into this? And I will say this was partly because, if not mainly because, of the civic relationship, the civic theater relationship with this project, that arts was first and foremost in many ways. How do we create this space that's so important? Next, I will talk about, well, there's where we are. So next I'm going to talk about the North Side District. Another project that is more of an incremental development of steps to become something that is a great public space that is inclusive for small businesses, etc. For us, DFA, we started working in that space in 2015 by financing the Marriott that you see. So we had a capital lease structure, that sales tax exemption. We provided conduit revenue bonds for the $15 million of construction, and that just was a start. A couple years later, we supported the Northside Marketplace alongside a private bank. Opening that space for small businesses, entrepreneurs, artisans was really important. And we've had some stops and starts. Certainly COVID was not helpful in that space, but it's really grown into something where small businesses can have somewhere where they're not quite ready to make that leap into a brick and mortar of their own, but they can sell their goods, work with others. And one of the things that I'm especially proud of for our organization as we've grown, we have small business loans. So we went from the large-scale Marriott to supporting the Northside Marketplace, and then we went also to supporting specifically the small businesses in that marketplace. So many of those businesses that, if you don't go there frequently, you should, have worked with us too, accessing capital, and that is a goal for us as DFA and the other organizations. How do we have more intentional investment that way? Now this is probably considered more large scale. So I'll also talk about, there's another picture of Northside. And some have grown out, by the way, outside of Northside Marketplace and had their own shops, which is great successes. So I'll also touch on the Nightlight, an independent theater here on High Street. And they, a couple years ago, started a campaign for a second screen. And that takes time, certainly, and many of you probably are aware that capital campaigns often have timelines to them, so commitments in multi-year form. How do you get your project up off the ground sooner when you have that timeline to work with? So we worked with them and tried to create a product that can be flexible for them to get started. So we bridged the gap, essentially, on that capital campaign. So they are in the process of getting that second screen now and having a larger space for everyone. It's all them, right? That's the thing, that we just want to be supportive and find ways, new ways to make things happen. And I will end with DFA, right? We've come a long way. We are a lender. That is a factor. Risk always comes to mind. But I am encouraged when I'm seeing in the community here, ourselves, my organization, and other communities too, when we're seeing more intentional investment, looking at things of how can we do it differently, knowing that we won't always get it right, but we've been learning and growing in that aspect over the last few years. And I'll close with this. It may sound a little corny and not something that a lender should say, but I really believe that no dollar that is invested into small business, arts and culture, into our community at large, is ever truly lost. At the very least, even if you lose those dollars as a bank, as a lender, it's going into opportunity. It's going into the ability to learn, explore, and provide tangible benefit to the people that we're serving. And I don't think that value can truly be quantified. So, thank you all.
Now we welcome Rick Rogers to the stage.
Thanks. Nicely done to both of you guys. Dave, what an impressive survey of the arts in Akron and history. And Christina, thanks for the introduction, and also thanks to the Akron Community Foundation for making this possible, and the support you've given to us over the years to make Curated Storefront possible. After selling B.W. Rogers Company, I just want to see if I'm going the right direction here. Yeah. In 2014, supporting Akron seemed a logical place to focus our resources. It's the city that brought us our success. B.W. Rogers Company operated out of Akron for 86 years. The people who worked for us and the supporting community are what made Curated Storefront possible. In the 1950s, the center of Akron was bustling with activity, and we regularly, my family, my brothers and my parents, regularly came downtown to shop, eat, and go to the movies. The city's population would crest at over 290,000 people, with downtown serving as a well-established commercial center. Factories, businesses, hospitals, government offices, houses, and schools lined the city's crisscross streets. By 2010, much of the downtown street edge was empty. A walk up Main Street from Exchange to Market was 70% dark when I sold B.W. Rogers Company. In October 23, the Knight Foundation commissioned HR&A to do a city's case studies, and Akron is a key subject of this study. They highlighted the challenges that we face and the population decline has had in Akron. When I founded Curated Storefront in 2017, it was with the hope of tapping into the past energy. By engaging artists from both near and far, Curated Storefront set out to reveal all that Akron has to offer and to simultaneously transform the downtown as a site of cultural and economic potential. Over the past 8 years, visual and performing artists have done exactly that. The question now is to how to redefine our economy, how to rebuild our workforce, and most importantly, how to inspire people to believe in Akron again. When people think about economic development, they often think about factories, offices, and tech hubs. But we cannot overlook the profound impact that arts and culture have on revitalizing our city. Cities with a thriving art scene and strong creative class experience higher tourism, increased local business revenue, and improved property values. More than that, they create spaces where people want to live, work, and invest. Some of the models that I've witnessed are here: Miami's Wynwood District, Denver's Rhino District, and Cincinnati's Over the Rhine. These were once blighted places that are really vital today. The change was catalyzed by the arts, and this dynamic has played out in many cities across the world. Investing in the arts should be a cornerstone of our downtown redevelopment strategy. That means expanding public-private partnerships to fund creative projects, supporting local artists through grants and commissions, We must also promote mixed-use development that merges arts with commerce, live workspaces for artists, and incorporates great design. In 2016, the Knight Foundation saw the benefits and provided seed funding for us through the Arts Challenge Grant. And there's several other organizations who were in that class of 2016 that are here today. There are concrete results that we've seen of the impact from over $4 million of arts funding injected back into the downtown Akron arts ecosystem through Curated Storefront. Since 2017, we have brought to life long vacant storefronts in urban areas with installations and digital projects. This is a piece by a Brazilian artist in the side windows on State Street, the Polsky building, from a few years back. Our goal is to ensure no windows along the street edge appear vacant. Activity can be seen day and night in multiple locations along the downtown contemporary arts quarter. We also want to be seen as a home for a dynamic creative class, and subsidized studio space like our facility at Bounce attracts and cultivates aspiring artists. The Clayton Bailey World of Wonders Museum attracts visitors, both young and old, from around the world to Akron to see the legendary robots, ceramic wonders, and bizarre experiments. Last year, we had over 2,000 people visit us, and we were named as one of 2 institutions in the city on the State Creative Trail this year. In an attempt to get a mural done of LeBron James about 7 years ago, I approached the LeBron James Family Foundation, and unfortunately we weren't able to get LeBron and the artists that we wanted together, but in the process we found an opportunity to do good at the I Promise School. We created a platform for the students and teachers to engage in collaborations with regional, national, and international artists through a visiting artist program there. On the north side, we deployed several shipping containers which have been transformed into mobile art galleries and performance spaces. And I don't know how to make this thing go. There we go. At any rate, this is our pixelation project, which is, it has allowed us to be in numerous buildings that we've turned into digital canvases through what we call pixelation. It's a coordinated display of various video and generative media, which is all linked together through a software system that works over the internet. This space is was in the Bowery, right? Actually, I think immediately next door to where we are today, and it was rented after about it's 8 or 9 months. This artist is a Cleveland-based artist, Kasumi. We also are in discussion with Times Square Arts out of New York City. And they've asked us to become a midnight moment screen for their programming that includes all 95 screens in Times Square. So we will be able to bring internationally renowned artists to our screens on a monthly basis as they're being displayed in Times Square. Let's see, did I miss something here? Let's see. Any rate, we also have annual murals that we try and produce on a large scale every year. This one is right behind us on Lot 2, and we are currently in the process of having 2 significant sculptural commissions, which are slated to go into Lot 3 Park later this year. And we are also negotiating to bring sculptural work on loan to install in unoccupied outdoor spaces downtown. Quaker Square galleries. This is an installation we did at the Quaker Square during the last front triennial in 2020, some of you may recall. Curated Storefront provided curatorial and administrative services for the curated courthouse, a program championed by Judge Stormer to make the courthouse a more inviting and comfortable space. In 2019, we administered the Cauga Falls NEA Arts Grant, which commissioned 2 nationally acclaimed artists to place work in the Falls. And one of these, I think the one on the left is David Jones too. Peter Jones, excuse me. And I think importantly, I should recognize our team. We couldn't have achieved what we have without a strong and dedicated team of arts professionals. On the left is a picture from our recent development retreat in New York, where we visit individual artists, galleries, and organizations in New York in hopes of raising our knowledge of the arts and also bringing their expertise to Akron. I'm also really indebted to our board of directors. We have strong individuals that are involved in the arts locally and nationally. We have someone like Nora Lawrence from Storm King Art Center, Josh Green from the National Council of Education for the Ceramic Arts, and others that have been hugely supportive and helpful in us making contacts outside of Akron. Downtown Akron is now poised for growth. Residency and visitation rates are growing. The street infrastructure has been vastly improved. Housing is affordable and new real estate development is on the horizon. We have a new and energized team at City Hall. Downtown Akron Partnership programs, the new Lock 3 Park, and Akron's Bicentennial program will bring artists, residents, and tourists downtown to see what Akron has to offer. Art has helped us to reclaim vacant storefronts, turning them into commercially viable spaces. This is not just about aesthetics, it's about economic vitality. The seed that Knight planted has grown and now attracts support from near and far. We can count partners like Via Arts in New York, the county, the city, and many other local foundations amongst our supporters. Today, I ask you to think about the legacy we will leave for Akron. Will we let the challenges of the past define us, or will we embrace this moment as an opportunity to reinvent the city once more? I'm choosing reinvention and growth through the arts for Akron. Phil Maynard was an inspiration. He used to say, "Do your giving while you're living, so you're knowing where it's going." That really rings true to me. I want to see the results from our investment here and now, and I hope any of the funders that might be in the audience today will follow that sage advice and open up your pockets to support your passions downtown through the arts. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rick. Now we welcome to the stage Allyse and Mac Love.
No one told us how clumpy our shoes were until we were up here. Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. My name is Allyse Love. I am the co-founder and chief operator at Art by Love. And I don't know where he went.
Hey there, everybody. And my name's Mac Love, co-founder and chief catalyst and frequent artist, also at Art by Love.
So we founded our business 10 years ago. This is our 10th year. We are very blessed to be able to say that we've moved our business back downtown to Akron. We opened up a commercial art gallery, and it's our working studio right down the street on Main Street in the Chemstress building. So come see us. We have 20 artists on display right now, all local from the Northeast Ohio region. But we are here today to talk about public art, placemaking, and investment in the community, and doing this work that we've done for the past 10 years.
And so a lot of this starts off with a little bit of this data, and also just me meeting Allyse. I was born in New York. I grew up in Belgium. My father's from North Olmsted and raised me a diehard Cleveland sports fan, so I always wanted to live in Ohio. I met a girl while working together in the Empire State Building from Akron, and it was around that time that this study was completed. And as someone who had studied psychology, philosophy, and art, grew up in an advertising family and in an arts family, I was always looking for ways to try to explain and influence the people's perception of the value of art. And to me, this was really remarkable. This was a 15-year longitudinal study that demonstrated that handmade creative work by artists actually had a material impact in so many ways about the way people felt in their workplace. And our hypothesis was, well, what if we applied this same methodology and approach to the public space? What if we don't just focus on putting artwork in the executive office or in the main conference room, but in the common areas where everyone else lives?
So cut to 2015, we founded our business and began doing public art projects all across the region. And then in 2017, we were awarded a $240,000 Nights Cities grant, not an arts grant, a cities grant. We applied for the funding to test that theory, that an investment in the public art across all of Akron, not just the corridors that were already getting the investment, could generate a critical mass of creative energy, and new investment would follow. The neighborhoods, all 24 of them on this beautiful map, were energized. They were seeing change, and that change was being pulled from asset mapping that we were doing with neighbors, the street intercept interviews where we talked to residents on their home turf, and the action was all taken in a highly collaborative way. The numbers on the screen speak for themselves in terms of the project's impact, but I can tell you as a semi-outsider to this project, I kept my day job till 2.5 years ago. Benefits are very expensive, you guys. The project was the first of its kind, and it really changed the way our whole team felt and managed placemaking and public art projects moving forward.
So fast forward then to 2020. The city of Akron now has an art and culture plan, and the city also created the Akron Public Art Commission. So when this was created, this gave the city a mechanism both to evaluate and also to manage public art projects that are on city land or were city funded or had other city needs. And for us, it was vital because we had installed murals and sculptures that were on city property, and this was a process whereby we could apply to repair a sculpture that maybe got vandalized, or to preserve artwork that maybe was modular and needed to be moved out of the way because there was going to be looming construction. So right off from the start, we engaged the Public Art Commission, and very early on, conversations would come up and they would say, wow, like, you have all this knowledge of all of these areas of Akron. And we heard it from city engineers and others too. That's what happens when you go down every single city street. We were really privileged to carry all that information, and we thought, wouldn't it be amazing if we could actually give all that knowledge to the city? If we could let them know where every piece of public art is across all 24 neighborhoods, who made it, what condition it's in, because a lot of it was kind of invisible. Residents might know about it, but that information didn't always make its way to leadership or to others. So what we wanted to do and what we proposed was creating a public art inventory for the city of Akron.
In between pitching that project and winning that project, we applied for and received a destination development grant from the Akron Summit Convention and Visitors Bureau, where we got to map an art, cultural, or historical asset in every city, town, or village in Summit County. There are 31 of them, if you were wondering. We wanted to include this project here because there are issues to overcome in Akron. We know that the investment in art is lagging, and we need to fix that as a group. But Akron is flush, as you've seen before us, with public art and cultural assets. There were a few small communities where we struggled to find even one asset that was not a war memorial or a graveyard. So we have a lot to overcome in Akron, but we have a lot to be proud of as well. And then we got to work mapping the city of Akron's public art and cultural assets. A public art inventory is a searchable database that the commission can use to go guide their decision-making and their spending. We didn't want to just map the location or put it in a spreadsheet. Each record includes the dimensions, a geotagged location, multiple pieces of imagery, a condition assessment, if it's dirty, if it's broken, if it's beautiful, if it's vandalized. And they can search that and sort that and use it to guide how they manage their public art moving forward. We visited every piece of public land in every ward, from parks to fire stations and rec centers, using public art ward maps, public space, DMing artists on Instagram. Sorry if any of you got DMs from me, randomly asking you what the title of this piece was from 15 years ago. But we also use the knowledge we built from the At Play project to capture all of the places in between. Art on a devil strip, or a historic structure that isn't easily seen from a street, like the steps in Goodyear Heights. And note, this is a comprehensive inventory of all public art in Akron. It's not that. It's a starting point. This is public art that is on city land, was city funded, or is city owned. There is more to come from there.
So the public art inventory was completed earlier this year, I think around January. Thank you. And part of doing that inventory was not just collecting this vast amount of data. It's a total of over 725 records. And it required a lot of kind of pivoting as we went, because we would run into things and we had to determine, like, should we quantify this as public art? Should every bench and every memorial be a piece of public art? What about collections like the police department museum or the fire department museum, which many people weren't even aware existed? How do we actually account for all of this? And so we constantly updated it, and then we created a desktop and mobile application that has both a public-facing side and an internal-facing side. So the public has the ability to filter this by location and by type of artwork. Internally for the city, they can filter everything by ward, by what's rusted, what's vandalized. If you want to see what's broken, if you want to see what is at risk, or if you just want to find a sculpture trail, all of that is very easy to put together in this. Now, for any of you, when this finally does get released to all of you, give yourself a little time to go through it, because this is kind of a new tool and an exciting tool. It might be a little unfamiliar to you, but it's incredibly powerful, and it provides visibility to so many artists and so many cultural landmarks and treasures, which may be the gems in certain neighborhoods, but I think many others weren't aware existed. So on the final bit here, we were asked to also posit or present to all of you like an ask, like what can you do, how can you get involved? And as someone who moved here in 2013, it was interesting to me to kind of become aware of our funding landscape. And Akron is an incredibly generous community, and so much is given, and people are doing amazing work. We sometimes hear that art is always over-delivering in Akron, and I think that's true. I think it is in almost every city. In some countries, art is more of a necessity rather than a luxury, and I think people in Akron with the blue-collar roots here, a lot of people appreciate that. They appreciate the importance of dance, the importance of theater, the importance of music and the visual arts. But I think it's also important to point out the landscape and a little bit of the difference. You will notice that and this is something I just created just yesterday. I was like, you know what? I know that this data exists. I'm just going to put it together and see what it looks like. Now, I'm not a forensic accountant. I did not look at everything. This is by no means complete, but I think it does paint a little bit of the picture and the reality of where we sit within the arts and culture landscape. You'll notice that in Cuyahoga County and Stark County, those big red parts of the pie, those are arts funds that come from taxes, both the sin tax and then also the bed tax or hotel tax in Stark County. Now, Akron does not have a mechanism like that. What we do have is an incredible philanthropic community that makes up a lot of that difference. But in terms of what it represents per capita for artists and for people in our community is a fraction of what you would find in some of these other counties. And so artists are always digging deeper, always looking to produce more. And I think our institutions are always, they're incredible. I mean, we really do have amazing arts institutions here. But I think there's something to also be aware of, that if you haven't read about it, There's a provision in the state budget right now, House Bill 96, I think I need to look at it again, but there's a provision to put a sin tax, to allow voters to vote on whether we should put a sin tax in Summit County to fund the arts. Now, if we could do that, we could drive so much new investment towards the arts. We could make working as an artist a much more affordable and realistic prospect. That would make us so much more competitive for creative individuals, because as someone who lives here in Summit County, I actually can't apply for a lot of the funds that are available in Cuyahoga County because I don't live or work there. It's the same in a lot of these other counties. Those funds are taxed from those residents. They purposely, intentionally, and should go back to a lot of those residents. But it does make it a little difficult for us as creative professionals. So if you can, please talk to your local representatives, encourage and advocate for having this put on the ballot. And then the one last thing I would add is getting it on the ballot is no sure thing. We have a major uphill climb to convince the public that a new and additional tax deserves their vote on this, because it will be a tax on them. But I think it's incredibly important, and I think us talking about this honestly and encouraging others will only drive more attraction, appreciation, and awareness of the beautiful place that we have here. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right, now we welcome Dominic Moore-Dunson to close us up on the presentations.
Hey everybody, I'm Dominic Moore-Dunson, a dancer, choreographer, and producer here in Akron. And when I was invited to speak on this panel, the prompt I was given was, how does performance, memory, and narrative impact public good? And it got me thinking about not just what I create, but why I create it. And so today I just want to offer this one simple idea. We are who we remember. So as a dance maker who spends a lot of time listening to intergenerational stories, I've come to believe that we are who we remember, and more importantly, how we remember matters. So in 2020, the day that George Floyd was murdered, me and my wife, we had a house in Kenmore, and we were pregnant with our first child. And it was the first time I'd considered the question, what am I gonna tell my black son about police? And that led me to this journey of talking to black parents, friends, elders, strangers, and those conversations were so rich and so meaningful, I realized that I couldn't keep them for myself, that I needed to find a way to give these conversations to people who were interested, people who were asking the same question. So I made a podcast called In Cop Negro, Black and Blue. And then in 2022 of June, when Jalen Walker was killed right here in Akron, I felt like we existed in this space called the aftermath. And because of that, I created a dance theater piece called In Cop Negro, Aftermath. And that piece asked the question, how do black communities heal after police violence happens in them? What are the elders passing down? What are the youth inheriting? Now, in a very different project, right here on your right, the Remember Balloons, I adapted a children's book about memory and Alzheimer's into a multi-generational dance theater piece. And that work was inspired by another conversation with my wife, where she taught me and told me about the day she remembers her grandmother forgetting her and never remembering her again. If you don't know, that story is about a young boy who has all these memories, and his memories exist inside of balloons that he carries around. And his grandfather and him spent a lot of time together exchanging their stories. And the problem is, halfway through the movie, or halfway through the book and the show, you realize that Grandpa's losing all of his balloons. And so it's this story about memory, and how memory, either good or bad, painful or joyful, it makes who we are. So when most people think about professional dance, this is the picture to think of. And I don't know if you've noticed, but I don't think I look that good in a tutu, right? And so this was the word I was trained in. It was this idea of dance as escapism. This idea that life is so hard, our job as artists and entertainers is to help people escape to a different world that we've created so they don't have to deal with the one that they live in. And while I understand that, I wasn't raised that way. I come from a home of four women across 4 generations, great-grandma, grandma, mom, older sister. My great-grandma was born in Elizabeth, Mississippi in 1915. She came to Ohio through the Great Migration. She survived the Jim Crow South. She was born in the Delta, which if you don't know is the birthplace of the blues. And the thing about the blues is that it's not about escapism. The blues is about facing the truth, singing it out, and finding hope anyway. So that's the tradition I create from, not to help people look away, but to help them see more deeply. So my process is rooted in conversation, not extraction. So for Incop Negro, I talk to black folks, black and white police officers, pastors, coaches, students, teachers, parents of those whose kids were killed by police. And in these times, these aren't like your listening tours, right? These are mutual conversations where both of us are wrestling with something. We're having an honest conversation together about that something. And sometimes the outcome is a show, sometimes. Sometimes the outcome is just a conversation. I've done rounds of research for topics that I never made art from because I realized that I don't need a product to validate a process when all I want to do is be in the presence of other people, right? I don't need a product to validate process with people. And so you'll see here on the left, this was during the Remember Balloons. This isn't here in Akron, but we're in Des Moines, Iowa, with my little man in the blue shirt kind of yelling and having his time. We were in a daycare that half of the daycare was for littles, and the other half were for our memory care friends. And so over the course of a week, we brought them together every single day and did movement exercises with them that brought about stories and memories. And so to sit there and be someone instructing them and get a 75-year-old and a 5-year-old sitting across from each other, telling each other stories and watching them laugh, there's nothing like it. And then on your left here, I'm talking to Officer Shantae Ford, who was on the beat in Minneapolis 5 minutes away from where George Floyd was murdered. She heard the call when it happened. And this is actually the first episode of the podcast. And when we were having this discussion, we were both talking about reconciling with our positionality and what we should be doing during this time. And what she taught me about was how she wakes up every day asking this question about whether I'm black or am I blue. And the thing about this work is when you're listening to people tell stories, when you're cultivating, taking these memories, you're not just listening to what they said, you're watching their body move and seeing what their body does as they tell a story. So then when it comes to making a show, making choreography, what you take is some of the stuff that you saw, right? When people get uncomfortable, they start to mess with their hair a lot, right? They don't look you in the eye, they look straight down and to the left or the right. And those are the things that show up in the choreography. Same thing with the kids and elders. Like, how does an older person tell a young person a story? They get over animated. So how does that show up in the choreography as well? So these are the kind of things we're looking at when we're talking about memory and memory as performance. So this here is the representation of a West African griot, this cultural figure responsible for remembering history, their people, and the stories of their community. So in cultures without written history, the griot is kind of like a living archive. They don't just memorize names and dates kind of like a history book. They remember who their people are, and they tell those stories through performance, through song, through dance, through poetry. And in many ways, I see my work as the same responsibility. I'm a contemporary griot, an American griot. Because, you see, we know what happens when our memories and our stories get misconstrued or distorted so that those narratives only benefit a few people and erase the rest of us. So to me, an artist's job isn't just to create, it's to collect, it's to reflect, and it's to remember. To hold up a mirror to the community, not just to show what's happening now, not to just show what is, but what could be. Because memory shapes identity. Because what we remember, we act on. We are who we remember. So this is what dance looks like to me. Dance is collective memory from a community. Dance is being with your neighbor. Dance is seeing resilience in choreography. Dance is seeing love, pain in the body and showing it. And as much as I love and appreciate those who dance in tutus, thank you, I was born to dance the blues. Thank you.
All right, so now we will do some dance moves and bring our chairs to the middle so that you can we can engage in a little bit of a moderated conversation, and then we'll open up for Q&A. Okay. Sorry, civic staff. All right. I got it. Hi, Osito. Thanks for joining us. All right. So I took favors notes here, and I want to start with you, Dave. So, Dave, your passion for Akron's history is undeniable, of course. And it's helped shape who we understand ourselves as a community. So what sparked the commitment for you personally, and what lessons from Akron's past do you think are most important as we imagine a more creative and vibrant future?
I read a book when I was a junior in high school, Carl Grismer's History of Akron and Summit County. And joined the Summit County Historical Society for $5 as a student member, and I've been a member now for 60 years. So it has been my passion, and I've read just about everything, I suppose, that's available on Akron history, and so that's sort of what ignited it. The lessons, and more appropriate for today, are these. You know, John Meacham, the author of The Soul of America, said that sometimes we feel that the crises of today, God knows we have enough of them at this moment, the crises of today are beyond our reach, that they are insoluble. And yet a reading of history and a study of history shows that these crises have occurred in the past, and that we've always found a way to manage the crisis and to move forward and to be better afterwards than we were before. In a real tactical way, tactile way, we've done that at the Akron History Center here, 2 doors down, by creating 20 steps to social justice. There are 20 identified events on the steps from Lock 4 going up to Main Street that sort of provide the detail of those things that were bad and those things that were good that bring Akron to where it is today, in terms of racial equality, gender equity, and the rights of the disabled. And so as you look at these past events, things were pretty horrible in 1900 when they burned Akron City Hall to the ground right here, 2 doors down, okay? A white mob was going to lynch a black man charged and kept in the Akron jail, right here at the corner. Didn't happen in Mississippi, it happened here. But when you look at the lessons learned, it gives you confidence and a positive attitude that things can be reconciled and we can move forward.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dave, for that. But Rachel, you've shown how creative financing can bring visionary projects like the Bowery to life, turning bold ideas into real places that serve both people and culture. What would it look like if this kind of investment became standard practice across our region, and how do we get there?
That's quite the question. What would it look like? I mean, it would be amazing, to put it simply, but I think the thing that I look to with these types of projects that we point to as these are successes, as they are and they should be. The Bowery is one. We should not forget the other aspects that can incrementally get you to that place as well. Not everything has to be done in large form. So I don't know if this is answering your question, but what I see is having a lot more of incremental, smaller types of investments that happen, that when you combine them all together, they exceed the large projects. You need to have both, but have more of that alongside, because it's really hard. You saw the structure chart. It's really hard to get those done. But it's not as hard to get the smaller ones done. And so that's what I would like to see, and I'm not sure I answered your question, but that's what I think is possible too, to the point of not everything that we use for this Bowery structure, for example, is always available. So how do we weave different flexibility, what we do have, to make good things like this happen?
And so, Rick, I get, from what Rachel is saying, you've done that, right, a little bit. You've done that incremental work with Curated Storefront and shown that art can be a catalyst for economic revitalization. Yet many still view art as a luxury, as Mac was saying, rather than a necessity. So what do you believe is the biggest barrier to integrating art into mainstream economic development strategies? And how can communities overcome this perception?
I think it's key to exposing art to people from a young age. I mean, that's a long lead time goal. But I think when you bring kids to arts when they're young, they appreciate it. But I look at even people without resources just down the street, coming out of the Mayflower building and looking at our work, and they're critics, and they come out and they tell us what they like and what they don't like, and they appreciate it. So I think it's innate for everybody to really appreciate art. I've got this disease, this collecting bug, where I like to accumulate stuff, and it plays out in art. But I think everybody innately appreciates art, and it does at the very high end. People with money amass huge collections, but there's anybody in this room can start collecting and appreciating art. And there was a couple, they both worked for the Postal Service. And I'm drawing a blank on their name. I don't know if anybody in the audience can remember, but they gave this massive collection of art that they put together to the Smithsonian. And then from there, and I'm not sure if the sequence, that some of it may have gone directly, but the Akron Art Museum owns some pieces from their collection. And they did not have great financial resources, but they managed to put together a beautiful, comprehensive contemporary art collection out of the salaries from working for the U.S. Postal Service. So it's not inaccessible if you put your mind to it and you appreciate it. I think you can bring everybody into the picture. And I look at corporate, the corporate setting. Everything around us really are all the cultural objects we have, our works of art, the buildings we're in right now. This microphone was designed by somebody and is an object that can be admired as brilliant design. So I think it's all around us, and maybe we're swimming in it, we don't realize it.
I appreciate that, Rick. Thank you. And Mac, when you shared, and then you and I shared being a transplant to Akron, right? So Mac, you bring a global perspective, right? One where art is understood as a necessity, not a luxury. And so since then, you and Allyse have dedicated your lives to making Akron's creative voices visible, naming the artists, mapping the culture, and connecting stories across 31 communities. So what has Akron or Summit County taught you about the role of art in belonging, and what still needs to shift for that truth to be fully embraced? And then Allyse, I got a question for you too, but we'll go from Mac first.
Belonging, I guess, is something I've searched for my entire life, everywhere I've lived. I started going down random streets and getting lost on purpose because I wanted to just accumulate as much information as I could about the places I was. So when people referenced a street or a park or something, I knew what they were talking about. But I've quickly found in doing that in new places that after about 3 months, I knew a little bit more about the landscape than the people who've been living there for 15 or 30 years, because they were always going the same route. they weren't going north or weren't going south because it wasn't on their way to work or to school. And so I quickly felt like I belonged, but also like I had a responsibility towards others to share that information. I'm hoping I can get the second part of the question right here, but like the role of art in belonging, because there was a discussion about like, well, I mean, so discovering art going down those streets, it was like Indiana Jones, like treasure finding. You know, you'd find those.
Not like Indiana Jones.
It was for me, for sure. Like, you know, there's this great. It's actually I believe it's a sundial. It kind of looks like a bird bath right now. It's in Waters Park in North Hill, and it's this piece of like stone and concrete right along like the roadway there, and it was like half in a bush when I found it. And it looks like a piece of like Aztec art or something from like Egypt. And you know, you go to places like
Now,
New York.
those are a little too different, Mac.
I know.
Okay.
I can't
All right.
identify it. I don't know. So I'm trying to fill in the gaps. Like, how did that get here? Where did that come from? I don't think it's from Akron.
Okay.
All right. And so Akron has this rich history, and even though it may have been an arts and culture wasteland for a period of time, I think there was a DIY culture here that did so much. And so I got to break it out, because I've been thinking a lot about this book I read in college called The Aesthetics of Architecture by Sir Roger S. Scruton. And he said, "We are lucky to be building on the achievements of our ancestors, and the important thing is to maintain them and to not throw them away." And that's such a big part of the inventory. It's also a big part of why we should also invest in new art. Because to paraphrase something I think Picasso said, that like the act of making art is keeping a diary. And so there are artists who are living and expressing things that we all need to see and share and talk about every day. So we need to preserve what we have and preserve those stories, but also capture the ones that are going on right now.
And Allyse, then, as you both continue with this journey, this Indiana Jones journey, okay, what's the next dot you hope to connect, or the next title of the movie of Indiana Jones?
Ooh. I think to piggyback a little bit on what Rick was saying, there are 20 artists in our gallery right now. Multiple of them have never had a show. Some of them are young. We have an artist, Day, who just graduated from art school, and she had a friend bring her flowers on our ribbon cutting day because she had never had a piece of art up on a wall in a place where someone could buy it. We have older artists, younger artists, people who are finding it in all of their, phases of life. And if that next dot that we can connect is someone walking in and saying, "Oh my, I need to see that more." And what you look at is going to be different than what I resonate with, is going to be different than what he resonates with. And finding that piece that you want to keep, that you want to be yours and look at every day, to Rick's point, to grow your own private collection can be 2 pieces. They can be postcards. They can cost $50. But it's yours, and you got to contribute and support this artist. And so it would be like Indiana Jones through the gallery glass or something. I don't know. I don't know what it would be. But I need a hat is clearly what I'm taking away from this.
Thank you. Dominic, your work centers Black narratives with both urgency and beauty. And you've spoken about how art can serve as a form of escapism. In a time when DI efforts are being politicized and challenged, what does it look like to sustain that space for joy, refuge, and truth-telling? And how do we make sure that Black artists and communities continue to shape, not just survive, the cultural future for Summit County?
Yeah, I mean, I think first it's encouragement to not stop, right? Like with the funding landscape and what's happening with the administration and DEI efforts, it sends a really loud message that we don't want you, you don't belong here, what you have to say doesn't matter, right? But to hear and to receive grants and fellowships and things like that, and spaces in a gallery and things like that, it says the opposite. It says you do matter, your voice does matter, we want your history, we want what you have to say about your people now, so that generations from now they're looking at your art as the history that's being passed along. So I think as we continue to move forward, dollars and cents, right? Money matters, right? Money matters in the ability for people to make work, right? Dance costs a lot of money. The Remember Balloons, which is super awesome on PBS, cost me $250,000 to make, right? And we had to raise all that money to put up a 60-minute show, right? And we're lucky that's on PBS, we're lucky that's archived in that way, but it very well could have did a couple performances and that's it, no one ever saw it again, right? So money matters, but also the encouragement and the spaces and the opportunities for Black artists to create, and their creations also not to be censored, because a lot of times we have things to say that will make people feel uncomfortable about our current reality. Because also saying, hey, you can be here and you can do stuff, just don't say that though, right? It's just another way of saying, well, I mean, we kind of like you, but don't be saying all of that. You know what I mean? It's another way to say that you don't belong.
Well, to wrap up before we open to the rest of the audience, Rachel, you had mentioned that the Bowery didn't just preserve buildings, it preserved the possibility of art that might never have happened. That's a reminder that when we delay investing in creative infrastructure, we're not just postponing progress, we're risking erasure. So for the rest of the panel, sorry, Rachel, but taking your words, for the rest of the panel, how do we make sure our decisions today don't cost us the culture of tomorrow?
Artists talk a lot about imposter syndrome and how none of them necessarily know if they've got it, if their work is it, if it's special. There's imposter syndrome in the general public too about what art is. And so I would encourage all of you to talk amongst each other about the things that matter and that you value. You don't have to look at something and be able to say like, oh, this is an incredible work of contemporary art. If it has a meaning for you, express that, share that with others, own the piece, bring it home. I think staying vocal and staying active and recognizing that your voice and your perspective and the perspective of others matters is one of the best ways that we can preserve these values moving forward.
I think as we make these big decisions, talk to the art makers, like the laborers of the arts, and see what their perspective is on these big decisions, especially if you have privilege or a platform where your decision will have a wake effect on everybody else, helping yourself by understanding their perspective, because there's a lot of things that artists go through on a day-to-day basis, and when it comes to making art that you might not know, right? Like I said, $250,000 and a bunch of eyebrows went like this, right? It's like there's things that we have and things that we go through to make the work that also deserve to be considered.
Anyone else? All right. Well, then with that, let's do a quick round of applause. And a quick shout out, I don't see her, but a quick shout out to Francine, the lovely and talented Francine Parr, who helped me with the little loopy
She's there
video.
in the back.
Hey, there she is. The lovely and talented Francine Parr, Artistic Director of the Living Theater Project. Thank you for helping us out with the beautiful background. And so we'll open up now for Q&A, and do we have a microphone out there, or do we need to pass one? Thank you. So Brian has a microphone for anybody who has a question in the audience. Brian?
First of all, thank all of you. This was so tremendous, and this is why we love Akron, because of what all of you are doing. And we get to help, we get to enjoy, appreciate. Mac, you mentioned, was it House B 96? House Bill 96?
Yes.
Okay, it was startling to me to see what Stark County and Cuyahoga County get and what we get. And I know that we have tried to get a sin tax and art tax over the years, and we have not been successful. And I think if this takes a grassroots movement on our part, I think that this is something that we all need to get behind. I know at one time when we were discussing something like this, we discussed having a lobbyist. I think Bill Blair might have been mentioned. And I'm not I'm not a big fan of lobbyists, but we need this. And so I'm just wanting to know what we can do as a community. All of you need help. And this would bring us more money, just like Cuyahoga and Stark has. And it would be such a great help. So I'm just putting this out there to see if it's grassroots, if it's a lobbyist or whatever. What can we do? Thank you.
know that, I don't think Nicole is still here, but Grace is here. Connect with Arts Now, because they have been focused on this fight for a long time, and they've made really great progress. We know that our city is on board, our county is on board. It's not just about us, it's about who's in Columbus and who's in Washington. So I would connect with Nicole and Grace, and I'm sure I'm giving you work, I'm sorry, Grace, but they will give you things that you can do and who you can talk to and who you can make your voice heard. But I think you're right, Barbara. It's going to take all of us, because if it's been that long that someone's been trying for this, something has to break. Something has to make it work.
Christine, as an elected official, one of the things that you all need to do is come and see us at whatever level we are at in a government position on a regular basis, not just at budget time, because you all have some amazing things that you're doing. But speaking for myself and the colleagues on county council, we don't know a lot that's going on if we're not out engaged. And if you're not the type of person who will go out and engage in that, you've got to come tell your story to us. What you showed here today is extraordinary. From Dave's history right on up to the final presentation. We need to know the stories. We can't make decisions on things we don't know are out there. So, and where's Phil Montgomery? Because he'll shoot me because I'm talking money. But, oh good, so I can talk about money. Seriously, that's a way to do it. You don't need to pay a lobbyist to do this work and spend the money there. Spend your time, keep your money, but spend your time letting those folks, whether it's Akron City Council, County Council, state representatives, state senators, whoever it is, come see us. Let us know you're there, not just at budget time. And I will say, one person in the arts community that does that beautifully and on a regular basis is our Nicole. She is always available to us, and that's a good thing. But that's one voice. We need to hear many voices.
Just something along those lines I was going to mention was that I think if this provision does make it into the budget, we'll have an opportunity to cast a vote. I think it's important to remember that it's a very different proposition to ask Summit County residents to pay a tax for something they've never had before, rather than to renew a tax for a library or for a school system. And it's a very different proposition. And so I wanted to share that because I wanted them to understand that it's kind of like talking about twice the number of dance performances and like hearing music in the streets and more after school programs. And I mean, it's so much. And so I'm getting chills just thinking about it, because I know how much all of us care about it, how much all of us already donate and contribute to it. But I think it's a great good, so hopefully it can come to happen.
Firstly, this is a phenomenal conversation. So huge thank you to Akron Community Foundation and this wonderful group of leaders in our community. So my name is Dominic, and my organization is the Akron Sneaker Academy. And one thing that uses sneaker culture as a vehicle, one could argue that it started here in Akron with Chuck Taylor in our basketball industry. So that's something I'm going to keep fighting for. But a part of my initiative is how can we make art and culture, first of all, connect with this next generation, but also use it as a vehicle to start create pathways in our community, because I'm thinking about the greater good of Akron, not just seeing art, but how can we start to use it as a vehicle to create more artists and more innovators within our own untapped potential, because there's a population here in Akron that maybe doesn't feel acclimated to maybe high art, whether it's ballet and things of that nature. How can we start to use art as a vehicle to energize and mobilize our community and really acclimate communities that maybe feel left out? Well, as someone who grew up through the kind of public education, arts and culture thing, right, went to Robinson Academy, left there to go to Miller South and the Firestone, I think that some of it is like, there's only so many spots in those schools now, right? So it's like we have to put that in more places around Akron, right? Like, I was talking to a friend, Zach Cole, and he went to his son's, I think, like, band concert, right? And he was like making a joke about how rough the band concert was at the school he went to. He's like, well, the kids who love it went to Miller South. And while on one hand, it's kind of funny because oh, it's not great, and he's a dad, oh God, I don't want to be here. But the fact is like all the kids who have a high interest in that thing go to one place. And then everybody else without the level of training, the kind of teachers that have spent a lot of time, cultivating those kids, right? And I feel like, what is it like to have a Miller South or a Firestone in multiple places in Akron so that kids don't get left out, right? Like, I only went to Miller South because my mom was like, you going to that audition? I was like, to what, right? Like, I had no idea that even existed. It's because my mom did it. There's a lot of moms who won't, right? Or can't, right? But if your homies are going to this thing, you're just gonna at least follow along to see what it was. But we have to have more spaces like that in Akron in order to do that work.
Hello. I am all for a sin tax. My mom tried to pass something like that, God knows how many years ago. But could we maybe get some information on how to help this process? I mean, a step-by-step guide, who we should contact, those sorts of things, and send it out to everybody that registered, or heck, just send it out to your mailing list. I do think that it's very important that we have this type of funding. I had no idea the disparity between Cauga, Stark, and Summit, and it's very eye-opening, and I do think that we have a lot of people here that are invested in this, so I think we could rally. I think political activism is the way to go. So it wasn't really, I guess it was a question, but I'm actually looking for an answer. So.
Oh, while somebody else thinks of a question, and maybe this is Dave for you and Rick. Dave, when I asked you to be here, I thought about Heinz Bowl, right? And the reason why I thought about that was because as a transplant, I have continued to be amazed at the amount of cultural assets and arts assets that we have in the region, in Summit County specifically, that go underappreciated. What is it that we can do as a community to begin appreciating the arts, right? And Rick, like you've traveled very many places and you've seen that art is a necessity. So where do you both see us doing to help? Which in that activism we could help with is being brought up here. But how do we learn to appreciate the arts again?
I think we are. I think that one of the things that the brief historical presentation that I gave you today shows is that Akron was a cultural wasteland for at least 100 years. There was no appreciation for art. People were too busy surviving. And in response to one of your questions, Dominic, when your life is survival, art really takes a second place. On the other hand, when you look at any group of 5-year-olds, they're dancing. When you look at any group of 8 or 9-year-olds where you've given them paper and a crayon, they're artists as well. It's innate. Everybody has that as a child. We then teach it out of them or discipline them out of the basic motivations to make art. And that has changed. I think Akron Public Schools are doing better. We have a representative here today whose job is to make sure that that continues to happen. In recent years, Nancy was referring to the CARES petition that her mom, Ann Brennan, and Mary Ann Jackson promoted. Shortly after I joined the mayor's office in 2002, I got a call from someone who said, it's too bad the city doesn't support the arts. So I went to the finance director and had her make a list of all of the arts programs we were supporting. It was over $500,000 that nobody appreciated because it had never been packaged in one place and looked at one time. And so today, the city has put money into it. The Heinz Pole Festival, for example, is mostly supported by the city. You could hire 2 cops on the budget it takes to produce the Heinz Pole Summer Dance Festival. So that's a question, as Jeff knows, of priorities. You're constantly balancing safety, for example, with what other money you have that you want to do, the needs versus the wants. And we need to have more people want art to be supported by public entities. And as someone once said, we don't need any more poets. We need people who buy poetry.
Well, you said that very well, Dave. The one thing I saw in Miami is we've been going to Miami for over 40 years, and The Wynwood section of Miami was 20 years ago as a warehouse district, lots of walls, no windows, but no art. And because it was unpoliced and not expensive, artists were attracted to start painting on the walls. And suddenly there became a critical mass, and artists were coming from all over the country to paint walls in Wynwood. And next came residential development, restaurants, other cultural amenities, and it sort of exploded from a grassroots effort from the arts community, and it was very low cost. The city didn't have, actually the city fought it initially. The artist would come and paint for free just to get the recognition. And if you go there now, block after block after block is covered with murals. And murals are, if they're executed well, they're the least expensive way to place art in the public space compared to sculpture or any other types of art, or digital is very expensive. That's a place to start, and I think people appreciate it. It has a very cool vibe, and I think that's a way to build from the ashes, basically.
I appreciate everything that you guys have shared today. It's been very impressive. The nature of artists are that they are entrepreneurs working often in a singular environment. And we have, over the years, as we've learned today, recognized the pros and cons of that right here in Summit County. But from what my recollection is as I age, is there was an Akron Area Arts Alliance whose purpose was to pull together the individual grassroots needs of artists to lobby, to push forward, to raise awareness, and to be the advocate for these individual artists who cannot afford to make a living by doing that and create their art. So I'm just saying that maybe we need to look at the Akron Area Arts Alliance and reinvigorate it and get it going again and get like-minded people to come together to make it a powerhouse, to bring those funding dollars both from individuals and from our governments to this area as we deserve. Thank you.
When the Akron Area Arts Alliance was created in the late 1990s, there really wasn't any other platform for artists together, and multiple institutional artists like the Akron Symphony Orchestra, the Akron Art Museum, Tuesday Musical, the Civic Theater. So the Akron Area Arts Alliance was the first attempt to bring everybody together. It succeeded in the sense that out of it grew Summit Art Space when the Summit County government actually provided that space, that building, for it to occupy at low rent or no rent. And then with the help of GAR and Knight Foundation, we did the landscape study 10 years ago. I think Howard Parr will have to correct me on this, but about 10 years ago. That came out of the same movement as well. It then created Arts Now, which is a significantly well-funded community, countywide arts organization that is doing those things that you have just mentioned. I think that there always has been some jealousy between arts organizations because they're competing for funding. And so if you give money to Stan Hewitt, does that mean you're not going to get the money for the Civic Theater or the History Center or whatever? And so there does need to be more collaboration, but I think by and large, we have a reputation of being one of the most collaborative communities in Ohio, and that will sustain us, whether or not we decide to find a system for public funding, which has been on the table for 25 years now. I'm looking at Howard Parr because he was a leader in this 25 years ago, and he has the whole history of it. If you want to know, ask him. And buy him a beer at the same time, please. It'll take alcohol for him to tell the whole story. We've been there, and Nancy's mom and Mary Ann Jackson put forth a Herculean effort in order to get their CARES issue on the ballot and voted. And we learned a lot from that, but the learning didn't follow through because people sort of gave up on it. Now it's time perhaps to reintroduce it. And I'm just going to say one more thing. You see that piece of milk glass right up there hanging over the top of you? I just want to point out to you that that is original to this building. In 2002, Rachel, when our economic development director, Jim Phelps, wanted to whack all 6 of these buildings and build a whole new building here, we took a tour of these buildings, and down in the basement of the White Loft Cafe, we found 2 of those milk glass fixtures, which we've now dated to 1922 or 1924. And so with the help and approval of Howard Parr and his architect, we've installed both of them. One is there and one is around the corner. And so hanging over us today is a century of art.
Thank you so much. Well, that will conclude with, you can't say anything after that. So that concludes our session for today. Thank you everyone for joining us. As you know, we host these quarterly to go along with our community investment grant cycles. So our next one will be sometime in July, if we make it through the transition of our software, or it might be in August, just bear with us. But it is essentially coinciding with our quarter cycle, so our next one will be Civic Affairs. So we look forward to seeing you there. You can come to any and all of them. We always welcome you with open arms. There's always great information, and we always try to highlight, you know, the cream of the crop, which I think, I don't know how I'm gonna top this. I did myself wrong here. But in the meantime, I gave you this, and thank you guys so much for joining us, and to our team.